All right, let's get started. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Thank you teachers, members of the Chicago communities, students, parents. My name is Nick Limbeck and I am the acting chair of the Chicago Teachers Union Climate Justice Committee. I'm also a member of the CTU Executive Board, and I'm excited to help host this forum with Ali Trugger, who is also going to be hosting it with us, who's also a teacher and leader in our union. This forum is here to talk about how communities are fighting environmental racism all over Chicago. We've got a great panel of teachers and community leaders that are going to tell us all about three important campaigns organizing really the people against polluters. But first I want to take a moment to kind of explain a little bit about how this forum came about and how CTU members are taking up the struggle for environmental justice. So I thought I'll share a little bit about my own story because I think it illustrates how, a teacher's struggle for justice and for our own union and public education is really starting more and more to connect to the struggles of communities and the struggle for environmental and climate justice. I started off teaching 8 years ago in the Southeast Side. This is a really tight-knit community, really strong community of working class people, Latinx community mostly. I started working at Callisto Elementary School and I was excited to be a new teacher, excited to teach my second graders. And I was also excited to be a part of this powerful union, the Chicago Teachers Union, fighting for public education. And I got right off the bat, got involved in our union activism, joining the 2012 strike, meeting my coworkers on the picket lines. But soon after that, and we won some really important gains for our communities and for our teachers and paraprofessionals and public education in general. But as soon after that strike, I realized my involvement in the labor movement didn't just stop at the school door, and that really I had, in order to really make a difference in the lives of my students and even my coworkers, I had to take up the fight beyond the school doors. I was teaching second grade and I started to realize that a lot of my students had asthma. I saw these little second graders in my class wheezing on the playground or in class, taking their inhalers. And I heard about stories of teachers in my school dying young from cancer, and rumors about how there was too much toxic waste in the school, in the community, that was leading to people having premature deaths, having respiratory illnesses. And then I looked on the windowsills of my classroom and I saw a black powder, a soot that was coming from petcoke, a byproduct of petroleum, and that was being stored, toxic waste stored only a few blocks from our school. And I realized I needed to find out more about this, and I got involved in a community campaign to stop the dumping of this toxic waste in the East Side. And from there, I got more involved in environmental justice. And I think this has been the story across the city more and more as teachers are realizing that the same kind of companies, the 1% that are sitting on some of the school board positions and fighting the unions in our city, are also financing a lot of pollution in our city. And furthermore, more recently, we've found that we've heard from scientists in at the UN and across the world that are saying we only have 10 years left to stop, to basically cut carbon emissions 50%, to stop climate change before it becomes a catastrophe that could lead to hundreds of millions of people having to uproot themselves and just untold natural disasters. So there's been a clarion call, and a lot of our communities have already been leading that struggle. You're going to hear from some amazing organizations that have been charting that path already to fight environmental racism and call for a just transition to a green economy in Little Village, on the east side, southeast side, and in McKinley Park. But right now, I think that the teachers are seeing a movement of students across the world and students in Chicago fighting that struggle for climate justice and environmental justice, and also these communities. And recently we decided we really needed to throw ourselves into this struggle and use our power, our leverage as unionists and as teachers to help our students understand the climate and the environment in their communities, and also help teachers understand that we need to get out in the streets and call for a just transition to a green recovery, green jobs, and even green schools that where we can retrofit our schools and solarize our schools, make them sustainable, and put people back to work that are out of work during this crisis caused by the virus and this economic fallout. So that's why we started the CTU Climate Justice Committee. We encourage all CTU members to check us out and join us and reach out to us. There's going to be a form that you can fill out if you'd like to join that. And also all community members and teachers to consider joining some of these campaigns in these three communities, and let us know through that web, I guess it's a Google form that'll come out a little bit later. And so we're excited to have you all here, and we hope you enjoy our panel and learn a lot. And I'm going to kick it off to Hallie to introduce our panelists.
So yeah, thank you, Nick, for that introduction, and also for taking the lead on starting the Climate Justice Committee and kind of bringing CTU into this fight for environmental justice as a form of racial and social justice. As Nick said, we're really joining this fight and building on some amazing work and history done by different community environmental organizations over the past several decades. And we're really fortunate to be joined by many panelists. So we have panelists who are teachers and activists from 3 communities in the city. For that reason, I'm going to be keeping time as people speak. So panelists, I'll let you know if you're, when you reach 5 minutes, and then ask you to pass on to the next person. So the first question that we're going to ask from representatives of community environmental justice organizations is to give us some context, to tell us the history. How did we get here in each community, and what implications do you see in that history and in the current fights for racial justice? So to start, I'm going to ask Karen Canales from the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization to talk about the history and the struggle in that community.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'd like to first acknowledge that the city of Chicago has been built on stolen land, right? And this is the same land that has been extracted from, contaminated, and taken advantage of for so many years. It was because of indigenous peoples and their knowledge that really helped Chicago grow into the city that we know today. So a lot of the diagonal roads that we have, a lot of the highways, you know, everything is really just because of indigenous peoples. It is definitely a city of brownfields and Superfund sites because of, you know, the toxic industrial use of the city throughout the years. I would even say that the whole city is a brownfield, right? It's important to understand the indigenous knowledge that I was talking about that was colonized in order to understand the movement of goods that we see today. Right, so the reversal of the Chicago River and the Chicago Sanitation and Ship Canal were built specifically to move waste from our drinking water source, Lake Michigan, away from the city and towards the Mississippi River, right? As well as the movement of goods and industrial water use. So this body of water was not ever really intended for recreational use. And now when we're thinking about redevelopment along the canal, we really need to think about, do people really want to be recreating, right, along a really toxic body of water? This has led to the industrial development directly along the canal and other waterways across the city. So I'm sure we're going to talk about, you know, what's going on in the southeast side and in McKinley Park as well. Neighborhoods grew along the industrial areas due to the employment opportunities that presented themselves, right? So South Lawndale, our little village, which is predominantly a brown and Black community today, is a reflection of this development. About 50% of the land use in the neighborhood is being industrial. So literally that means more than 50% of our entire neighborhood is being used right now for industry. This leaves very little land to redevelop into institutions, housing, public resources like parks, community centers, and more. Sorry, y'all. I have my little one in here, so that's who's distracting me a little bit. So Little Village Lawndale High School was unfortunately built inside of the industrial corridor on top of contaminated land and surrounded by toxic industry because of this, right? So today we're going to hear from teachers and students around how has this really impacted, right, the day-to-day of being in a school that is in the industrial corridor. Thanks to unfortunately and fortunately, right, because of all these issues, we've also been able to have a lot of opportunities to work together and to collaborate together for
I think we're having a little technical difficulty with Karen's connection. So let's see if this got back on. Here we are.
Hi, sorry. I think my computer froze.
You're good to
And
go,
also, we got
Karen.
you now.
Okay. What was the last thing that was heard?
You were just finishing talking about how the high school was built on toxic land.
Yeah, so right, Little Village Lawndale High School was unfortunately built inside of the industrial corridor, which is the third largest in the city. The industrial corridor in Little Village is the third largest in the city, right? So because of this, like I was saying, it has presented itself with opportunities to work together and collaboratively with people, right, with community members, with our schools, with our students, to fight environmental racism, right, to fight for environmental justice, and hi. And so we're going to hear today from teachers and students around how, you know, these situations that we've been put in, right, have also created opportunities for learning and for growth and for activism. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Karen. So that's a great introduction to start. I'm now going to hear from Olga Bautista from the Southeast Side Environmental Task Force to give us some similar history and context for that community. Thanks.
Can you hear me? Thank you guys for doing all this and for having me. I prepared a little something. So history has shown us that the people of the Southeast Side are dispensable. We have been left to squander and die without even the basic resources to survive. 40 years ago, when one by one the steel mills in the community began to shutter and close, leaving tens of thousands of workers without jobs. In Christine Wally's book, Exit Zero, she shared that Wisconsin Steel alone, which closed in 1980, put 3,400 people out of work. The Daily Calumet reported in 1989 that 800 of those workers had died. Most deaths were attributed to workers, by workers to factors relating to stress or loss of health care, heart attack, suicide, alcoholism. That's just shy of 25% of the workers from one steel mill. It's always funny to me, like when people of color are blamed for the downfall of this region, of my neighborhood, when actually we've always been here, and the neighborhood fell apart when the steel mills closed. But for many people here, their racism and their nostalgia skews for them what the community was really like in the good old days. I heard an old timer that lost his job when the mills closed talk about the marches that workers had at that time to try to save their pensions and the mutual aid efforts that were organized to help one another. He told me how organizers negotiated with pharmacies, utility companies, even the milkman to help those that needed it the most. I think about the steel worker a lot these days and what it must have felt like to have the rug pulled from underneath him and tens of thousands of workers in one neighborhood at the same time. The despair and anguish that was felt, and how parents were out there trying their damnedest to create joy for their little ones, to shelter them from the collective depression that was being felt through this whole region. much like many of us are doing right now during this crazy time, during this pandemic. The way that we organized when industry was growing and there was a sense of possible prosperity is decidedly different from the kind of organizing that we do today, which is mainly for survival and protection from a system that seems hell-bent on killing me and my community. In the post-industrial age, the large sprawling factories spewing out pollution are now dead halls, scarring the horizon of my community. Many families feel the scars of that period and reel from the long-standing health issues that still impact us today. We have folks who have never recovered from this series of economic aftershocks, from the loss of income, the loss of access to healthcare, foreclosure, the inundation of dirtier, more polluting industries with their promise of jobs, but ultimately only end up hastening our exposure to even more deadlier and diabolical practice that spew toxins. The inequities in the city of Chicago's development and underdevelopment practices are as clear as the sky is blue. On one hand, we have Lincoln Yards in the 78, developments near the gleaming downtown receiving billions of our dollars for redevelopment. And in our community, the old steel site, it's a large swath of US steel site, which is a large swath of land along the lake, can't get the investment needed to remediate the contaminated parcels. We are a community that is perpetually in fighting mode for the clean air that we need to breathe. We have the highest levels of asthma and COPD, of coronary disease, and we want and need jobs in this community, but we need jobs that won't make our community members sick. We deserve that. Thanks to the leadership of everyday impacted people, we have been working really hard to hold polluters and elected officials who allow these dirty practices accountable, and also demanding that development in our beloved community that is rooted in equity, environmental justice, racial justice, and more. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Olga. And then lastly, we'll hear from Alfredo Romo from Neighbors for Environmental Justice about the efforts in McKinley Park.
Thank you, Haley, Nick. I also want to thank the CTU Climate Committee for organizing this important forum. I think it's very important to allow us to bring awareness to environmental justice issues that many of our vulnerable communities are constantly facing across our city. I also would like to, give special thanks to the rest of the participants for this evening, for their time and attention. Yeah, when it comes to these three environmental public campaigns, they are really exhibit A as to the concerns and the grievances that many of us have around air pollution and its effects on health and the environment. And that's the primary reason why environmental justice organizations are fighting back hard to best protect our communities from the fumes, from particles and the harmful substances that these companies like Hilco, General Iron, and Matt Asphalt produce. And this is one of the reasons why we need to be very wary as to how these dirty polluters are coming into our communities. To begin with, they're coming in with a permit to pollute. That's something to really just put in context. That the city and the state are allowing these players to come in close proximity to our parks, the schools and homes. And that right there should be alarming to us all. So when it comes to Matt Asphalt, this is exactly why M4AJ came into existence. We are a group of concerned friends and neighbors. They became aware of an asphalt plant, that will soon be operating in McKinley Park. So when we found out that this plant, which is a heavy industry, was going to be, situated in front of our park, next to schools, and 1,000 feet from our homes, that really caught our attention. We knew from day one that they were going to have a hard time mitigating, containing their pollution, and we were right. So now we have been organizing for the last 2 years. I would say like two and a half years. And those concerns that we had, before they started their operations, they have come to fruition, unfortunately. Now we have people in our schools that are complaining of headaches. They're complaining of respiratory issues. There's people that are waking up to asphalt, strong nuisance odors in their homes, private property now. So, we're going to continue to organize. One of the things that, that I'm always concerned as an organizer is that, you come across the social demographics as well, right? Where you have people that are, undocumented, right? With undocumented status. There's people that are, there's a language barrier. And I think that this is the reason why the city, the structure, it's environmental racism. They allow these dirty polluters to once again come into vulnerable communities that people are not going to be able to push back. So we don't have economic power. We don't have political will to really, make sure that there's different mechanisms and different structures that can best protect our communities. One of the biggest concerns that I would like to also point out is that right now, Mad Asphalt is, they came in with a pretense of being a minor source polluter with a 1-year construction permit, seeking a 5-year operating permit. But now, based on our work and based on the exposure that we have done with our campaign, the IEPA rejected their application, their operating application. So right now they're actually they're still operating with an expired permit. And just put that in context, right? Like, how is it that a facility that is coming in with a permit to pollute is allowed to operate with a expired permit? So there's once again, there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of factors and variables that we need to continue to learn. There's definitely the permitting process from the state level, and there's also the zoning and the land use from the city. And I just hope that we can continue to create space so that we can actually inform our friends and family and allies, so that we can show solidarity in regards to these issues. So once again, thank you so much. Feel free to join these 3 campaigns. We are doing very, very great work. Thank you.
All right. So yeah, thank you so much to Karen and Olga and Alfredo for that context from the community fights. We're going to continue this and kind of focus on some of the themes that Alfredo is starting to raise by hearing from teachers and students about how these issues play out in schools and affect students and families, and then also some examples of really powerful work that teachers and students have been doing in all 3 communities to get involved and fight back. So we'll hear again first from Little Village, from Amy Livingston, who's a teacher at the Social Justice High School, and Sylvia Morris, who's a student at Sojo as well. So Amy, go for it.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm a teacher. I'm a chemistry teacher at Social Justice High School, and I'm going to talk a little bit of the work that we've tried to develop and have done at our school around these environmental justice issues. And so something that I was thinking about is I think that as teachers are going back to school, whatever that looks like this fall, they're going to be thinking about how to do a lot of anti-racist work in their classrooms. And I think that these issues around environmental justice and environmental racism are some really important ways that teachers and students can engage in that work. So besides just supporting these initiatives that these 3 organizations have presented, I think that something else teachers can do is bring these issues into their classrooms and work on them with students and really try to position students' learning as an essential way to protect their communities. And so at Sojo, which is what we call Social Justice High School, we've tried to do this for some time now, especially since CPS got rid of the environmental science course as one of the acceptable science credits for graduation. So I'm speaking from a science teacher's perspective, but I do think that these issues can be used in all grade levels and all content areas. So the first thing that I think for teachers who want to engage in this work that's essential is getting to know the community that you teach in and the issues that they face. I think we've heard that there are a variety of issues happening all over the city, and many CPS teachers don't necessarily live in the neighborhoods that they teach in. So I think that the only way that we're going to effectively engage with students on these issues is getting to know what's going on and working with these organizations or organizations in your community that you teach in can be really helpful in learning all of that in order to take it into your classroom. In terms of like what we actually have done in our department, so once we had an idea, and Karen really supported our learning with this from Alvejo, but once we kind of had an understanding of a lot of the environmental issues that were going on in Little Village, we decided to develop units around these themes of pollution, air quality, water quality, health, environmental racism. But it's really important to note that we planned these specifically tailored to the issues that we were seeing in Little Village. So I think that's really important for teachers, that as you learn about the neighborhoods you're teaching in, to try to tailor the curriculum as specifically as possible to the community students are living in. So we really focused on what's going on in terms of the coal power plant in Little Village, Hilco, a corporation called B-Way, and the high volume of diesel trucks that are polluting throughout the neighborhood. And we also felt it was really necessary while planning to leave space for Alvejo to come in and work with students, whether that's presentations or helping them develop actions. We thought it was important to leave a space for them throughout our units as well. So in these units, students were learning specific science content. So for me, that's chemistry in a larger context of these environmental issues, but they were also participating as scientists. So for example, our biology teacher took students out with an air monitor that they'd gotten from UIC, and throughout the unit, they went around the building and took air quality measurements. In my class, students collected soil samples from throughout the neighborhood, and we went to Northwestern to analyze them for heavy metal contamination due to the pollution from the coal power plant. And throughout this kind of like student participatory science, right, we always maintained this goal of learning these things to try to be able to explain what's going on to their community and families, but also to engage and participate in trying to protect themselves and their communities. In terms of what this work could look like outside of a science classroom, I think one of the most successful projects we did in our building was when our civics teacher partnered with Alvejo to organize a door knocking campaign around lead contamination in water that they'd studied in my chemistry class. And students made flyers, and Alvejo organizers came in and taught them how to run a door knocking campaign and went out and did it with them. And I noticed that student engagement in my class went way up during this, and it was such a motivation for them to learn, because they want to do this work. Young people want to be engaged in this, and they're eager to do something about their lived experiences. And I think we're seeing that right now with young people attending these marches and really leading a lot of these movements. And so just kind of like a side note for teachers, planning this way for us has been really complex and messy, but there's a lot of people in the city who want to support us in this work. We've had so much support from universities, or community organizations and other teachers that have really helped to relieve that pressure to be the expert. So I would just say that as we think about bringing these issues into our classrooms, we really try to position our students as the advocates for their communities and support these initiatives that these organizations are working on, because it really gives us a purpose in the classroom for learning and teaching.
And so on that note about the power of youth voice, we're going to turn it over to Sylvia Morris, who's a student at the Social Justice High School.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sylvia. I'm a graduated senior of the class of 2020. And I think like a little bit from what Sylvia was talking about for like as in lesson plans and stuff like that, and learning from it as a student. I viewed the lesson plans and what I was learning in two different ways. One as a student who was learning it on a historical level, as well as like learning it on as a scientific level as well, like the damage that's being done to my community like learning it in science, and then on was a historical note, like what is environmental racism and how long has it been here, learning about it and just discussing it as a whole, as in the classroom as well. And then also as a young person of color, just experiencing these things and viewing these things firsthand and stuff like that, and doing it in my community and seeing what's happening. So, and then was it with Alvejo, stuff like that, and working with them was also very fun. Was fun as well as it was educational, and as Ms. Livingston was saying, it was very motivating. And I think that's, I'm sorry, I blanked, but yeah, that's pretty much, I have no, Ms. Livingston did most of the talking, I'm sorry.
No, that's great. I think, it's not always quantity, like what you said is really powerful. And I feel like you brought in some themes that the teachers hadn't, that Ms. Livingston hadn't brought up. So thank you so much. One quick note before we hear from teachers from the other communities. I've heard people from Little Village mention Hilco a number of times. And I think a lot of us on the call are probably familiar with what's going on with Hilco and how that's an instance, how they represent an instance of environmental injustice. But just for anyone on the call who's not, I'm hoping that someone from your community can step in and just tell a little bit about that site.
Yeah, I was planning on talking about this in a separate part of the agenda, but so Hilco is the redevelopment, or the current owners of the redevelopment of the former Crawford coal power plant. Formerly, the Crawford coal power plant was responsible for over 550 emergency. Sorry, excuse me 1 second. All right, we got blacks going in the other room. So Crawford was responsible for over 550 emergency room visits a year, 1,800 severe asthma attacks a year, and 42 premature deaths a year, right? So from its very birth, the Crawford coal power plant has been a toxic site, polluting the neighborhood and polluting the city for many, many years, close to 100 years until it shut down in 2012. And the reason why it shut down is because of community power, right? So Little Village really fought hard for 12 years to shut down this crazy, polluting, one of the dirtiest coal power plants in the US. And so after it shut down, the same neighborhood, right, the same people, there was a task force in place and everything to put a plan in place for the redevelopment of the site. It's about 70 acres. So going back to land use, right, really thinking about how much land do we have to redevelop and what do we want to redevelop it for. 70 acres is a pretty large property, right? So now Hilco, the current owners, they bought the Crawford coal power plant, I believe in late 2017, and introduced this plan for a 1 million square foot warehouse in that site. So 1 million square foot warehouse is definitely going to bring in additional pollution with the hundreds and hundreds of trucks every day that they're going to be bringing in, but also with the jobs, right? We do recognize that we need jobs in the neighborhood, and we want to make sure that they're jobs that are actually going to be investing in the neighborhood and not just using the neighborhood, right? Hilco has time and time again told us that they want to come into Little Village because of our labor force, and we all know what that means, right? We all know that our great labor force is really a labor force that they can use and exploit to their benefit. So this Hilco plan, which is a 1 million square foot warehouse, again, is something that community members have time and time again told us that they do not want to see. Yeah, right now we're still fighting to get them to stop the development and demolition of the Crawford coal power plant. And it's still something that we're working on today. That's our current campaign, our current work.
Thank you so much for that, Karen, and to everyone from Little Village. We're now going to hear from Chuck Stark, who's a teacher at Washington High School, right near the site where General Iron is looking to move in, or looking to start operating, who's going to talk about the same topic of how these issues affect students and families, and how teachers and students can be agents in resisting environmental injustice.
Thank you. And I also want to give a plug here for the CTU. I will say what this initially started with Olga here encouraging us teachers at George Washington High School to reach out to the CTU and ask for help. And we reached out to the CTU Committee for Climate Justice. And next thing we knew, we had this forum put together that united all of these movements. So seriously, thank you all for putting this together, and to look here and see 111 attendees. Thank you all for your interest in this. Some background for General Iron. So I'm a science teacher. I teach mostly biology at George Washington High School. And on the call, you'll see Olga Bautista. If you were here from the beginning, you heard her speak. She's with the Coalition to Ban Pet Coke. And that's a movement that goes back a number of years. And now she's representing the Southeast Environmental Task Force. And the thing we're here speaking on is General Iron, which is a metal shredder. And if you've heard about it, it's the one that's moving from Lincoln Park. They're closing down there. They got zoned out of there because of Lincoln Yards. And conveniently, they happen to be able to move in down in the southeast side. And the current spokesman for General Iron is speaking about how there's this great barrier between their new facility they're going to build in southeast side and any neighbors. And to be clear, that barrier is exactly half a mile southwest of George Washington High School. And then the prevailing winds in that area blow from the southwest to the northeast. So any particulate matter they put into the air will be blowing towards our school. I want to start off by, well, I've already started, but I want to read something written by one of my students, Liliana Munoz. She was unable to attend, but she wrote this statement. And this is from Liliana. Throughout the 18 years that I've lived in the southeast side of Chicago, I cannot remember a single year where I have not smelled the stench coming from some of the factories around the neighborhood. Whether I'm around the south side or the east side, the smell follows wherever I decide to go. While I was attending George Washington High School, no smell was present, and it was one of the very few areas where I never experienced the smells that are all around the other parts of the southeast side. For this reason, I strongly stand against General Iron moving into this area, not only because of the smell, but because of the people around here and the unsafe air quality that will be surrounding the school. This new factory may meet all the expectations and safety requirements to move here, but that does not necessarily mean that it is doing zero harm. The particles and pollution being released will still happen. The people around will still breathe in these fumes. The students will experience unhealthy learning conditions even when they are inside of the building. The lack of knowledge over these factories is definitely a big advantage for the people who own them, since not many of us know the harm that it will bring, which makes the situation unfair. As a teenager who is already thinking about her future, I do not see a life for myself in Chicago because of the constant threat to my health and to my future family. It is also very concerning that this factory will be moving to a neighborhood where most people are minorities, because not everyone has the ability to leave when they want to, which will then leave them no choice but to stay in an area that constantly raises the risk to their health simply by staying here. The knowledge that I gained about General Iron opened my eyes to the little amount of attention that this gets, even with the large amount of risks that it poses for everyone in the community. It saddens me to know that other neighborhoods will become cleaner by removing these harmful factories from their areas, but ours continues to become unhealthy and threatening for all of us without anyone listening to those who want to stop it. For that reason, I will continue to speak on the issue even after I leave the area, although I do hope the restrictions become more strict to serve the community instead of going against them. Our leaders have the power to change how certain situations are handled, and I do not believe that they are doing our community any justice if they are failing to keep us safe in this case. I urge everyone to speak up against General Iron and to flood the emails of those in charge with ideas to fix our community. Let them know that we live here too, and that is why we should have a say in every change that is being made. Thank you, Liliana Munoz. So Liliana just graduated. And that's the power, and that's speaking to what Amy was talking about. Our duty as teachers, I feel, to put our students in these positions as experts and activists. I also want to quote Olga. She told me something a few weeks ago about how throughout this process of fighting General Iron, one of the things that has kept her going when she starts to feel down is the fact that the young people who are currently involved are the ones that she spoke to when she went and visited the elementary schools in the area. So she's seen this full circle happen. And it's like I say, it's our duty to help facilitate that full circle, because these students are the ones who will go on to continue the movement, who will join the Southeast Environmental Task Force or LVEJO or Neighbors for Environmental Justice. Those are the ones who will continue to speak up and can continue to hold the alder people accountable. Speaking, specifically to what I did, this is new to me. And so I did a lesson, it was a 3-week lesson aimed at trying to end by positioning students as activists. And I began by asking students to, envision what they saw within, radius around their school. So I wanted them to think about, what do they see in their neighborhood? What do they like that's there? What do they not like that's there? And I was trying to put them in a position of imagining they're a city planner. Then I asked them, what would they like to see if they could design the perfect community? And just got them, thinking through, what do they want their neighborhood to look like? And then I presented them with the issue of general iron. After that, the following week, we moved into really connecting it to our content, because that's really important. If we're going to bring up this, if we're going to partner with social sciences, like Donald Davis pointed out in the chat, we have to make our students the experts in our content area, or else we cannot do this work in our classrooms. So I linked this to the particulate matter that General Iron was putting in their permit with the EPA. So we talked about how that will affect the health of our students and residents. And the final week, I showed them examples of other youth that had videos of them speaking up in public testimonies, and I asked them to draft their own public testimony. And I provided some the opportunity to share it with Alderwoman Garza and potentially speak at the EPA hearing that was the following week. So that's the work that I was attempting to do, and this is new to me. And so there's a lot of room to grow with that. But I just want to, emphasize, re-emphasize what Olga said. Like, we need to keep our students engaged. We need to inform them of these things, so then they can go and become the ones carrying this work on.
Awesome, thank you, Jack. Myrna, are you here? I'm just gonna turn it over to Myrna to speak about how this is great. To talk about the same engagement of teachers and students and impacts on teachers and students in McKinley Park.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Give me 1 second. You got it? Okay. Oh, sorry about that. We have taken care of mom, have some family members to jump in. So I just want to so our task right now was to help understand how environmental justice issues affect schools and impact schools and families, and how teachers and students can help respond. So my name is Myrna Salgado Romo, and I'm an office manager at Namaste Charter School. I work in the office. I see students on a daily basis. I partly the nurse that works there as well. So I take care of students when they come into the school and they have breathing issues. I noticed it's a huge impact in the way that that it's affecting them, and I've seen the number of students with asthma increase every year after 8 years, and it's very, very scary to see that that's happening in our school. So I think one of the biggest things that we can do is understand what the issues is and what exactly environmental justice is, and how the way that it impacts schools is that right now here in the city, a lot of the schools are located in, a lot of the schools that are being affected by pollution are in low-income and minority communities. And I'm sorry, I'm a little got distracted. but they're located in environmentally toxic areas. The reason that being is that a lot of these communities are zoned for mixed zonings. So they have zoning for residents, they have zoning for industrial and commercial use. And those are the issues that are impacting these schools right now. One thing that we have that has to be identified is that a lot of predominantly white neighborhoods don't have these same issues because those schools are zoned for residents only. You know, so that's one of the things that I've seen personally, like within the communities that we're serving and that we're trying to help understand about these issues, how they're being affected by that. When it comes to pollution with regards to these industrial industries, I mean, they're going to be affected by so many different toxic elements. And some of them are already pre-existing in the schools. Some of those elements have to do with lead, asbestos, you know, and depending on the type of industry or commercial issues that are happening in your school, it could also be vermin, you know, from garbage that's being left out and not being cleaned out properly. So many things within the schools. Some schools, like the school in Little Village, are built on soil that has already been contaminated and hasn't been remediated, you know, and those things don't get addressed when they're building a brand new beautiful school, and it's a cause for concern. I personally didn't understand what environmental justice was. You as a low income minority person of that population, this wasn't something that we learned about very, very often. We have very limited resources as to understand the things that we have a power over. And it's important for us as educators, and I say that because I think we're all educators, for us to really start to instruct our students and help them understand how they can continue making that change and that impact. And definitely COVID has been so openly revealing of all of these issues and disparities within our communities. Some of them CTU is already fighting for. You know, we are fighting for, you know, nurses in every school, resources in every school, and we need to continue doing those fights in order for us to get those things that we need to do. We do have to open our children's eyes as to what issues are happening. Namaste, the school that I work at is Namaste Charter School. I think one of the first things that we did at Namaste to try to address these issues was change our school to a union school. And I'm really proud to say that we are in our first year of contract, and that's just an amazing win, because charter schools are negatively impacting these communities. You know, we had teachers of low income and minority groups that were being paid ridiculous amount of monies, and that's part of the environmental justice issue. So definitely, like, working together and changing that direction of how we're being undervalued and under-resourced is a big impact on how we can work together to make those changes. The other things that we're working about are changing the way that our schools are funded. You know, our schools are funded on property taxes, and that creates a huge disparity for the resources that are being implemented in the schools that have low income and minority groups who don't have the ability to pay those property taxes, and they don't make as much money. So, as Alfredo stated, they don't have as much influence. You know, they don't have that capital where they can really make those pushes on invoking different rights in our communities. So that's just some of the ways that you know, environmental justice issues impact our schools. You know, our school at Namaste focuses on health and wellness. We believe in the holistic approach of educating a child, and our pillars are health, wellness, and, you know, the environment. And when our kids are being exposed to environments that are polluted, it's going to hurt their development. It's going to hurt their morale. And we need to start working and informing those families and those parents of ways that we can help. Some of the ways that we can also help is engaging them and encouraging them to join those organizations, connect with other parents, connect with teachers, build those relationships and collaboration for us to continue that movement. That's it.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mirna. And I think you actually started speaking to what I was hoping other panelists could turn to next. So now we've heard from everyone on our panel. We're going to open it up a little bit more we have a couple questions prepared and then audience questions. But I'm hoping that panelists can speak on your vision. So we've heard a lot about our struggles, and we've heard about how different groups are resisting and taking action. But I know that in different activist groups and teachers and students also have clear visions and things that you're proposing for what would represent a more sustainable future for your communities. And so I'm hoping I think it would be great to hear from someone from each neighborhood about some of those plans and proposals. And this time it's open, so unmute if you're ready to.
I'm happy to go. And I just want to start first by saying that the teachers during the last strike went and put their bodies on the line, as you all know, at Sterling Bay, the developer for the Lincoln Yards. And a little bit of background before that happened, there was a city initiative called the Industrial Corridor Modernization Initiative, where the city was going to evaluate there's 22 industrial corridors in the city. And it is very clear to see that the city's priority was to redevelop and have a new playground for the rich on the north side, because they started to do the industrial corridor on the north side first. And then all these incentives, the billions of dollars that it went to be able to make sure that that project happened. And so before the data was even ready and presented to the city, the Mayor Emanuel made a decision to downzone the north branch of the Chicago River and to make way for Lincoln Yards. And I think it's important to talk about how that process basically helped kick out General Iron. The city was a concierge to not just General Iron, but also to Finkel Steel that was on the North Branch and other manufacturers that are in the North Branch, because they value rich white lives, and they'll give us, these neighborhoods, Little Village, McKinley Park, the Southeast Side, will be their dumping ground. And, we have a vision for a just transition away from fossil fuels. Before this issue of General Iron, was moved to down to the Southeast Side, we had the Koch brothers. This is where I met Nick Lembeck. We had the Koch brothers storing ginormous piles of petroleum coke that was being refined at the BP refinery just over the border in Whiting, Indiana. So tar sands from Alberta, Canada, were being piped down, pipelines all the way down here to Whiting, Indiana, processed. Anytime you make fuel, there's gonna be petcoke, there's gonna be petroleum coke. But when you refine tar sands, it's a ton of petcoke. And these piles, like Nick talked about in the opening, in the beginning, there was no rules in the whole city of Chicago for how they're gonna store petroleum coke. And these companies were just able to do whatever they want. So we definitely want to move away from fossil fuels. We want the city to divest their investments away from banks that deal with these big companies. We also have another issue. Last May and this May is even more wet, more rain than last year. And the flooding that's happening in homes across the city of Chicago, backyards, basements, alleys, is just extremely problematic. The kind of diseases that can be born through this sitting water. And in the industrial corridors, we share our sewer system with the industries. And nobody is doing any research right now on those basement backups to see if that water's toxic, if there's runoff and other things coming from these huge swaths of land that are completely monopolized along the river, monopolized by these industries. And so the challenge is really real in these communities, because I'll give you an example. We had funding, we had a health study that we were gonna do with University of Illinois in Chicago. And just before we were about to start to do the health study, there was an immigration raid here at a pizza joint. And it completely stopped the work because people were afraid to come to the doors, and we were afraid to knock on doors and freak people out. You know, like it's definitely intersectional, the work, the issues that we are dealing with in these communities, the issues of so much rain happening, this climate issue, racial justice. We're seeing these same communities that are getting slammed by polluters are also the ones that have the highest COVID cases, and not just COVID, but the recovery rate is so much lower in these communities because of so many respiratory issues that are that exist in these communities. So I think it's, you know, I love the lesson plan about planning your own neighborhood, you know, and instilling into the youth like what they would like to see in the future of their community. I think it's so important because they are the experts. They are experts in their own lived experience. I just want to say, like, there are no more piles of pet coke being stored openly in the city of Chicago because we organized, we fought like hell, and they had to remove those piles. Okay. When those pet coke piles, when we're fighting the pet coke piles, we realized the air monitors picked up manganese. Manganese has to all be enclosed. These issues that are happening around, you know, diesel trucks and new rules, you know, that we want to have like electric fleets and all the rest of it. All of those wins and fights have been attributed to the organizers in these neighborhoods. So even though we are like bombarded by immigration raids, flooding, pollution, police brutality, you know, lack of healthcare and insurance, you know, it's made us join all of those movements. The same people that are fighting to stop police brutality are also in my neighborhood, are also fighting General Iron, are also fighting La Migra, are also fighting for climate justice, and also lastly for universal health care. You know, so when CTU started demands for the common good, that was so amazing. That spoke to us, you know, and when I talked in my opening about how we organized back when there was industry compared to how we organize now, it's because if we don't do it, like our lives are actually on the line, our lives of our children. So I just wanted to say how important it was to be able to center curriculum around the lived experience of the youth. And like one of our teachers, a leader from the Rebel Bells here has said in the past, because youth need to know that what they see, what they smell, what they hear, what they feel is really what they see, what they smell, what they hear, and what they feel. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Olga. So I wanted to check in on time with everyone. I think on our flyers, we said this started at 6 and we had planned for it to go until 7:30. So we're gonna have a little bit more time, probably about 15 more minutes of questions and dialogue, and then hear about really specific actions that teachers and community members who are on this call can take to support these campaigns and to bring these issues into your classrooms. So if you're able, please stick around until 7:30. And if you're not, we'll send out a survey with next steps after to all registered attendees. But I wanted to leave that same question open to hear from other communities about the ways in which the alternative visions that you have for what would be a more sustainable and just future for your neighborhood.
I'm sorry to jump in, but if you have to leave early, we really encourage you to stay in touch so we can help you join this fight for environmental justice. So we will post the survey in the chat momentarily for you to fill that out before you leave if you have to leave early.
Yes, I would like to add, just to, the points that Olga was just raising right now, that they're very important. I think that, when it comes to the work that we're doing in, around environmental justice, issues, you know, the deeper you get into this type of work, you do realize that there is definitely two Chicagos, right? There's definitely, like two Americas. So one of the biggest concerns that I continue to have is the current administration right now at the federal level. They're really dismantling the EPA. The EPA is almost non-existent. So when you talk about sustainable developments, when you talk about bringing accountability and enforcement, right, of regulations and restrictions, you have the city level where you have the industrial corridors, you have all these PMDs. Right now, there was a study that just came out from UIC where the study showed that between Pilsen, Bridgeport, Pilsen, and McKinley Park, there's 40% of PMD available space. And for the last 6 months to a year, we already have 4 logistical centers that are like they just came out of nowhere. So what does that mean? That means more traffic. That means more particulate matter. That means more health issues to our communities. So that's pretty much from the city. So just connecting it to what Little Village and Southeast Side is talking about. They're basically cleaning the north side and sending all that garbage to the southwest and southeast side. On top of that, you really got to understand as to what the IEPA is doing at the state level. So when you talk about really enforcing regulations and enforcing the policies, right, that these companies are supposed to abide, you really have to ask yourself if the IEPA has basically cut off 50% of their capacity from 2003. I mean, how many inspectors are out there really inspecting these facilities? That's a big concern that we continue to come across. And that's one of the things that we continue to see that is not really happening. Right now, with regards to Matt Asphalt, we have about 200, resident complaints and reports against the polluter. And the CPD, the Chicago Department of Public Health and the IEPA is almost disregarding our concerns. So, I think that when it comes to this work, it continues to really, demonstrate the disconnection that the city departments and our, agencies that are supposed to protect our environment and our health are really ignoring us. And that's once again, that's very concerning to us.
Thank you. And then I'm hoping, can someone from Little Village also speak to the alternative vision you have for a more sustainable future for your community?
Yeah, go ahead, Sylvia.
The thing is, like, I do want to see like more. I know this is completely off topic to what these beautiful people have to say, but to see more community engagement opportunity. Like, what is it? I know what that happened with the incident that happened at the Crawford plant was it during the demolition, and I also know was it during the B-Way incident as well. Was it with the smoke and stuff like that? And the meeting we had after that, I would like to see more community engagement opportunity like that, where the community can come out and voice their concerns, because being able. I wasn't there, but I know that Alvejo was there. I know some of my teachers were there. I know some of my classmates were there, and were able to voice their opinions. We're able to hear what else everybody else has to say. And I think I was fortunate enough to be able to share their experience via local radio, of a community radio with a nonprofit organization called Yoakali Arts Reach. I was fortunate enough to be able to share their experience for that community engagement. I would like to see more of that, because sometimes I feel like that the community isn't able to voice their concerns, that everybody else outside of the community like speaks for the community and they're not a part of it. And I sometimes wish that like the community can speak for itself and voice their concerns for their homes and for their neighbors and for the neighborhoods. Like, I wished I could see more of that. And I also kind of wish, more of these environmental issues topics that we're talking about here on this forum also makes its way into the classroom as well. That the importance of gardening and fresh produce and stuff like that starts like at the beginning of kindergarten. I wish to see that as well. Or like the fact that environmental racism, I hope I also wish to see it as well as the way I learned it. I hope that other students in other schools get to learn it as well and understand that like this is something that's still happening. It's happened for a while and it's still happening today. I also wish to see that as well. And I wish, and I guess that's kind of the future that I kind of want to see in the foreseeable, nearby future from now, like that these topics and that these opportunities arise, and then I can see it and look back at it when I'm older, when I'm 32 or something, that like, yeah, like my kids are learning about this, or like my niece is learning about this in school, or like my cousin's learning about this too. Like it'd be really nice to hear that and see that like in a foreseeable future.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Karen, if you want to add.
Yeah, if I could just add, in the name of like economic development, right, and neighborhoods, which is something that a lot of our neighborhoods do need. What are we willing to sacrifice, right? What is the cost of that? And it shouldn't be people's lives, right? And when we're thinking about how we want to invest in neighborhoods, we should, instead of just thinking about bringing in jobs that are not really going to be investing in our bodies, in our neighborhoods, and in our minds, we also got to think about like knowledge, right? Knowledge being a form of wealth as well, right? So like instead of having this 1 million square foot warehouse, how can we change that into being a 1 million square foot greenhouse, right? How can we have opportunities for community members to really want to go to that site, right? Who's going to want to go to a warehouse? Nobody. But who's going to want to go to a greenhouse center that is also going to be providing solar training opportunities for community members, having some sort of entrepreneurship programs and a space for food vendors, right? Just things that are really truly going to be investing in the neighborhood instead of just using and extracting from the neighborhood. I just wanted to add that I think generally, right, when we think about a just transition away from fossil fuel industries, we also got to think about a just transition into something much greater, right? And thinking about wealth as being knowledge too, right? And like how can we build our knowledge wealth in our neighborhoods?
Thank you so much for that. So people have been saying really rich things. I think we probably have time for one more set of questions. And something I've heard come up a few times in the chat and the Q&A are questions about how our politicians and government agencies are doing. So questions about where's the IEPA, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency at? Has it gotten better with Pritzker? Where are our aldermen? Where's our mayor? And I know that a lot the activists and teachers on this call have prepared some really concrete action steps to push some of those folks, and that those show up on this post-event survey we keep plugging. So I'm hoping we can hear from each community, maybe Little Village, Southeast Side, McKinley Park again, and if you can just share out how have government agencies and elected officials been responsive, and what are you trying to do to push them? And then really specifically, what would you like the people on this call to do right after they get off this call to help push those elected officials? And so, yeah, Jack, you want?
Yeah, I do want to jump in and say, because a couple things came up here as other people were speaking. And before I get to the politician thing, I've been listening to the 1619 Project. And one of the things that was really powerful in that is how they pointed out that, the US Constitution was written to say that all people are equal, but historically it has not actually been that way. And it was African Americans that actually forced the United States to actually treat people as equal. And when it comes to like connecting this to the environmental justice movement, like the EPA has a definition of environmental justice, and they call it environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. EPA has this goal for all communities and persons across this nation. It will be achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards and equal access to the decision-making process to have a healthy environment in which to live, learn, and work. I just want to point out who is actually right now like holding the EPA accountable to that. And it's these organizations right here: the Southeast Environmental Task Force, Neighbors for Environmental Justice, El Vejo. You were the ones who shut down the Crawford coal plant, got rid of these coke piles, got Matt Asphalt's permit to change, right? You are the ones, these are the ones that are holding our officials accountable to things that they say they want to do, to make environments equal for all. And so I guess what we're asking here is specifically to the Southeast side, we're getting closer with Alderwoman Garza. And again, here it was because of a march on her house that a bunch of students and the Southeast Environmental Task Force organized. She finally agreed to host a public hearing with the Chicago Department of Public Health. So she's getting closer to saying that she's demanding a public hearing. She wants to deny the permits, but we need her to send a letter to the mayor, and we need to see her taking more actual steps. So perhaps Olga can speak to this, but at the end of this, click on the link to sign a Sierra Club petition, send an email to your own alderman or alderperson, and also hit Twitter up and tag the mayor, tag Dr. Arwady, tag Alderwoman Garza, and ask them to deny the permits, because we've got the opportunity for Chicago Department of Public Health to come in and actually deny them the permit, because the EPA has not done that.
Yeah, just to piggyback off, I think that was really great, Chuck. I love it. And to highlight that it's the youth, it's the ones with the most at stake for their future who took the reins of us 40-year-olds and like middle-aged folks, and we're like, we don't got time for this. Like, either you join us or get out the way. And we were like, hell yes. You're right, we don't got time for this. And that's what happened. Like, there was a march at at Alderman Sue Garza's house. And, you know, I just feel like the kind of changes that are gonna happen here in the Calumet region is not gonna happen in one term. And I understand that it's hard for an elected official to put out a vision that they can't accomplish in a term and then be judged on it. Like, I get that. But when you run on a platform about environmental justice, then in climate justice and then pit labor against the environment, that's fucked up. That's just not right. So there definitely has to be accountability, because when she ran for office the first time, what the issue of the time was pet coke, right? And you know, that it can't just stop there, right? Like, it has to continue. And what they can do, I mean, first of all, the IEPA would say things like, we can't deny this permit based on adjudication from the city. You know, the city went after them and fined them and held them accountable. We could only do it if they had, if the IEPA had. Well, what the hell? Then find them, then go after them. It's like, they're the ones. I mean, it's like, for me, it's almost like I'm in a freaking Twilight Zone when I talk to these agencies. The city of Chicago's Inspector General did an investigation into the inspections that CDPH does to all these companies. You know, there was over 100 companies who hadn't had a single inspection in 5 years. None of these issues that we've talked about today have ever been caught by a damn inspector. It's always the community people who, so there has to, yeah, there is, somebody mentioned on the call about a reckoning at the ballot polls. And I think that is what is the only thing that's gonna change that attitude. We have progressive caucus leaders who have taken huge risks, you know, and I don't have to name them. You guys know who they are. And I want to see that for my alderwoman. I want my alderwoman to go on a limb and to take a risk, because then what the hell is it? What's it for then? You know, what's the point of having a progressive in office if they're going to be beholden to the mayor? It's not right. So definitely call. So Sue needs to do what Bobby Rush did, send a letter to the mayor, not post on your website, because who goes on your damn website unless you're trying to find out like how you can get your tree branches cut, right? Like that's she needs to send a letter. She needs to hold a press conference. She needs to stand with 6,700 people who have signed a petition to keep General Iron from merging with RMG here in the neighborhood. I mean, that's what has to happen. Otherwise, what's the point?
Thank you again. I know that there's also powerful examples of the communities doing the work that inspectors should be doing in Little Village and McKinley Park as well. So if we can hear from the other panelists about how elected officials and government agencies have been in your cases, and then what specific actions you're looking for the community, for those on this call right now to take to push them. Thanks, Karen.
I think for us, you know, historically we've been working predominantly in 22nd Ward issues, and for many years it was under Ricardo Munoz, right? And I mean, if you don't know who Ricardo Munoz is, he's basically a sellout, right? He loved taking money from corporations despite community pushback, right? And so for many years, this politician did not care. He blatantly disrespected community time and time again by, you know, allowing polluters and industry to just have full reign on the neighborhood, right? And not being held accountable, all for some money. I think since he's left, you know, we're trying to see how we're working with the local politicians there right now. And, you know, I really appreciate Chuck bringing in the definition of EJ and policies, right? Because it's not just about the broken promises that politicians are giving us or that they're running on, but really, how are they putting it into practice, right? And if they really are about community members and, you know, community redevelopment and community health and well-being, they should be prioritizing community, right? They should be checking in with community members at every single step of the way. If they hear anything, right, 10 days before an implosion, they should be letting people know, not the night before, right? And so these are all issues that, you know, politicians, they do or they don't do things because of their best interest, right? And it's not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the community's best interest. I think right now what we're really pushing for is to get Hilco out of the neighborhood. Again, we do not want Hilco, right? And I think a lot of community members have made that very clear. Despite that, their walls for the new 1 million square foot warehouse are already going up. If you drive by Pulaski, you can already see these walls going up, right? So I think we really want to ask folks to, you know, to hold elected politicians accountable for what they do or what they don't do, and how they're lacking in protecting public health and safety. Specifically, right, we wanna encourage people to contact Mike Rodriguez of the 22nd Ward, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and Dr. Allison Arwady from the Chicago Department of Public Health. We definitely want people to target Hilco and Target, because Target, where a lot of folks love to shop, right? I know I love to go there too, but where Target is gonna be, it looks like they're gonna be the leasee, right? So they're gonna be taking over that warehouse that Hilco is building. So we wanna make sure that, again, hashtags, but if you can please contact folks, contact elected officials, and check out our websites, both lavillita.respira.org, and I'll put them in the chat right now. lavillita.respira.com and elvejo.org for more.
Thanks, Karen. And just a quick note, if you're following the chat, you'll see I keep posting this a lot of times, but we prepared in the follow-up survey, there's short links to all of the like call guides and things that will help you take these next steps. So if you're trying to scramble to write down who you're supposed to call, don't worry, just check out the survey. And so then last, if we could hear from McKinley Park about next steps that folks can take there.
Yeah, thank you, Hallie. I think for us, pretty much, it gets to the point that you don't have that many options, right? So as far as us as a community and as an organization, we are not accepting the fact that, Med Asphalt is here. We cannot coexist with Med Asphalt. So this is, just like based on their toxic elements, one of the things that they produce is, particulate matter. They produce 2.5, particulate matter 10, nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and volatile organic materials. Out of these 6 different kinds of pollution, this facility has only been measured on the particulate matter 2.5 and also the particulate matter 10. On the rest of the toxic elements, we don't know what the measurements are. So when it comes to us, we are asking the city and the state level to have strong considerations and limitations for them not to be able to put a dirty polluter in close proximity to a park, next to schools and residential homes. So just think about this. When you have your family, you're walking your dog, you're going out there to exercise, you're going out there to have picnic, and this is what you're dealing with. You're opening up your lungs. You're over here thinking that you're actually getting to an open green space, which that particular open green space becomes a community center. So we are definitely trying to apply the pressure to city departments, these agencies that are supposed to once again protect our health and our environment. And one interesting thing in regards to our campaign is that George Cardenas, who is a 12-war alderman, he's actually the chairman of the environment. To this day, 2 years later, he's still ignoring our campaign. So that's very revealing. That's very, telling us to what's going on with the connection between Med Asphalt and Cardenas. He received contributions from Med Asphalt, and that's once again, those are just red flags, right? That unfortunately, you see the flawed system, and you also see the corruption within our city. So we are definitely trying to once again apply pressure to the IEPA with regards to the permitting process. Right now, the permit, once again, they're operating with an expired permit. So they went from a 1-year construction permit seeking a 5-year operating permit, which was rejected. They pulled back that particular application, and they reintroduced a 10-year permit now. So that pretty much, that permit is still up in the air. Please, spread the word, help us, once again, apply that pressure to the IEPA and also the Department of Public Health and the mayor as well.
All right, thank you. And thank you so much to all the panelists for all of your insightful comments and all of the activism you've been doing through these years. I'm going to pass it to Nick to close up because we're approaching 7:30. Nick, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, everyone. This has been a really informative and inspiring panel, and so much that we've learned is going to come in handy when we join together and build this fight stronger. We're looking forward to reading all the survey responses and plugging people into the organizations and the campaigns that folks want to join. And I think we can just close, with a plug for August 3rd, which is going to be a National Day of Action for Safe Schools, and also demands for, recovery for our communities as we face the crisis of COVID-19 and the economic fallout. So that's really important to join us August 3rd, to keep up the struggle that connects us all. Downtown, it's going to be Occupy City Hall. And also, I want to just leave with another closing note. I think what Olga said really rang true when she was talking about how the youth really have been tired. They don't have time for waiting around anymore. We're not going to wait any longer to see an end to police brutality. We're not going to wait any longer to see an end to environmental racism. And we really honestly can't wait any longer to address climate change. We have only a few years left to completely transform our economy and our city and our country and our world. So I think we're going to see more and more teachers, students, parents, workers unions coming together across the city. And I could see something in the future where, you know, we have feeder marches from the southeast side, McKinley Park, Little Village, and many other neighborhoods converging on downtown Chicago, on our mayor and the powers that be to really demand a true transformation of our city, a green transformation that sustains our communities. And so let's leave on a positive note and build that fight so that we can take it to them and change our city for the better. Thanks everyone for coming, and have a great night.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks a lot.